this panel, and we're going to be talking about Pan-Africanism and trying to answer a whole range of questions. If you look in the program, there's a bunch of questions that are outlined, but the first question there is whether or not the idea of Pan-Africanism is a fantasy. And I think we have panelists who are more than able to shed quite a lot of light on the issue. Professor Adi is a professor of African history, one of the first, and I dare to say one of the best. And Saada is, how would I best describe you? A definer of what it means to be African.
No.
Oh, okay.
Why is it so hard to describe me? I'm a journalist.
A journalist?
It's quite easy.
Okay, there we go. So a journalist. So let's begin the discussion, because I find that a lot of times,
Can you people hear us?
Can you hear us?
No, the door needs to be closed because it's very noisy.
Yeah.
It's very noisy.
There's noise coming.
We need to wait a little.
Buying stuff and selling stuff.
Quick announcement, so sorry for the distraction. If you left your asthma inhaler in cinema hall, please meet me for it. If you're looking for your asthma inhaler. The panel has started, so we need absolute silence, please. Silence, please, people. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so this is much better. Now I think it's even a bit too loud on this side. So we'll begin the panel with trying to come up with a working definition of Pan-Africanism. And Professor, I think you are in the best position to do that for us. What is Pan-Africanism?
Okay, well, historically, Pan-Africanism is the understanding that Africans, meaning Africans in the continent and Africans in the diaspora, face common problems. Those problems might be enslavement, colonialism, racism, etc. And that as part of the solution to those problems, it's necessary to unite and to fight as one. So it's a conception which is concerned with the liberation of Africa and Africans. At certain points, I don't know whether this person has a microphone, but they sound louder than me. Maybe I should get them to interpret. So at certain times, that unity of Africans has focused more on the unity of Africans globally. On some occasions, it's focused more on the unity of the African continent, but always with the perspective that that unity is necessary for the advancement, the liberation of Africans globally. So that's essentially what Pan-Africanism is about. And of course, in different historical periods, it has taken different forms. In the 18th century, in the 19th century, 20th century, 21st century, it takes different forms. But that's essentially what it's about.
All right, thank you very much. Saada, what's your take on what Pan-Africanism means today?
Well, what it means, I don't really know what it means. I do know what I would like it to be. I think if I would ask my inner adolescent idealistic self, what Pan-Africanism would look like or what it would be, I think I would want it to be like a big old Wakandan shield around this lump of earth and just protect the shit out of it, you know? That's what I would see as Pan-Africanism. And then, you know, have a long and calm conversation amongst each other about what we think about each other, what we know about each other, what we'd like to do, how we'd like to live, who we'd like to be, where we'd want to live, and just understand each other and start building. That would be my take on Pan-Africanism. It's not the official definition, I know this, but yeah, that would be my dream, for us to start valuing what we have because the rest of the world wants it, and that's why we're in this condition.
Now, obviously this raises an issue. Both definitions raise an issue of, well, we could talk about what the origin of this issue is, which is the issue of the divisions both on the continent. When we talk about the countries we have, who define those countries, and when we talk about nationalism sentiments, what really is that? So I'll take, for example, when a group of people come together with a common interest and a common value and seek for a country, it's a lot different than when a colonial entity creates that country and this group has to figure out what that means to be together. So, and then there is also the divisions amongst those who live on the continent and those who don't live on the continent anymore. And those who don't live on the continent anymore, amongst them are those who were sent away. That's a fancy way of saying possibly taken off the continent against their will. And those who made the decision to leave the continent in search of proverbial greener pastures. Now, how does Pan-Africanism work with all these different groupings, or what does it mean with this reality of the different groupings, Professor?
Well, you see, I think the first thing to think about is we make a distinction between Africa and the diaspora. Yeah. So on many occasions, that's an arbitrary distinction and division. If you take 500,000 Africans from Africa and you take them to a French colony called Saint-Domingue, and those 500,000 Africans rise up in revolution and liberate themselves, what is that? Is that part of African history? Is it part of Caribbean history? Is it part of world history? Did they cease to be Africans when they landed in the Caribbean? Even though they were born in Africa, they spoke African languages, they had African worldviews, and so on. So we generally say, okay, that's the diaspora. But of course, those people in the diaspora had all kinds of longings and connections with the African continent, and so on and so forth. The other day, I gave you the example of the West African Students' Union in London. So people went from Nigeria, the Gold Coast, Sierra Leone. They organized in London. When they start organizing in London, they become part of the diaspora. Then, while they were in London, they organized branches back in West Africa. So then they then become Africans again. You see, it's in a way, it's a meaningless division. Of course, all the time, what was important about those groupings, those organizations, those activities, well, that Africans were getting together to liberate themselves. Those Africans who were in Haiti, they didn't say, okay, where do you come from? Before we can liberate ourselves, before we can overthrow the French and overthrow the British and overthrow the Spanish, let us first discuss whether we're Yoruba or whether we're Wolof or whether what are our, no. They didn't organize like that. They organized on the basis of what they had in common, what they needed to deal with at the time, and move forward and so on. So undoubtedly there were all kinds of differences. What languages did they speak? What was their worldview? What was their conception of this and that? But what history remembers is that act of liberation, that act of revolution, that African revolution, the first successful revolution of enslaved people in history. That's what history remembers, not the differences that existed. but that their unity allowed them to liberate ourselves. So I think that's what's important, and we can always look at what divides. And one of the things which divides is that the enemy, if I can use that expression, that neutral expression, the enemy tries to create divisions. So one of the divisions are the colonial constructs in Africa. Then there are other divisions which are, you can say they have an existence in reality, in the sense that people speak different languages and so on, but those differences are whipped up, whether they're in Nigeria or whether they're in South Africa or they're in, as we heard this morning, in Rwanda. So in Rwanda, everybody's the same, they speak the same language, have the same worldview and so on. The colonialists come along and say, no, you're not the same, there are three different types of people. And exacerbates those differences and those divisions to such an extent, as Madame Yolande explained this morning, that parents kill children, spouses kill each other because they consider they're all different and so on. So this question of unity, of people uniting to achieve their aims, is one of the most important aspects of Pan-Africanism, and overcoming those differences in pursuit of liberation, advance, and so on.
Which brings up the question of back then in history, over history, there seemingly has always been a clearer vision of who or what the enemy was, or what the issue that required uniting against the divisions were. So the slaves in San Domingo know, we're slaves here, we've been treated so badly, everything else is secondary, we need to get out of this situation. Today, what is it in your view that is so glaringly obvious, or that is so, who is the enemy that would force us to unite?
Well, I think it's several things, but I think it's a legacy of all those things that you just named. I mean, I feel kind of strange talking about Pan-Africanism in this building. You know, we're in a place called Alliance Française. This is where we're holding this venue. I mean, it's lovely. I like it here, but I like the croissants. I like your coffee, everything. But I mean, that is the present situation, right? We are still very much in colonial structures. I mean, colonialism hasn't really ended, especially not by the French, who are really working really hard every day to keep things the way they are, you know. So I could elaborate, but I think
please do. I think the croissants are already out. They can't take it away. So just go all the way and then come with me when we leave.
Okay, I'm not running, I have heels. Not possible. I don't run. But even though I'm Ethiopian, I don't run. But anyway, no, I think the realities are not, I mean, of course they're different, but the consequences of those things, the present form of it is not that different, I think. I mean, if you look at the language you're speaking at the moment, what is your ethnicity?
I'm Igbo.
Igbo. What is your ethnicity, Professor?
Yoruba.
Okay. Do you speak each other's languages?
I speak the English part.
No. Do you know what I mean?
No, I do.
I said each other's languages.
Yeah. No, but he said he was Yoruba and English.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you speak his language? I don't think I need to make a point.
Yeah.
We're both with people of Nigerian heritage, and the language that connects you is English.